This isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who is allowed to use it.
Let's see how the Acolyte marketing's getting on, shall we?
Well, Anakin just killed a whole Death Star. How many people died on that?
Oh, that's fine. He probably just made a mistake.
But if you can't look and see the Anakin blowing up the Death Star...
Leslye asked what I knew about Star Wars. I said Harrison Ford runs around space with a giant dog. She said, laughing, because she knows how farcical this is. Meanwhile, Leslye said, you're hired.
And Kofar, Kalnuckas, all the Ks.
Stop saying names.
It's the great thing about equality and inclusion. Low standards. But this definitely explains the cast interviews, though.
You should just shut up.
It's just
shut up. I love you. You should shut up.
The beauty.
She does have a reason for this, though. She wanted to potentially invite new fans, people like me, that were never interested in Star Wars before, and won't watch this one either, because they don't like Star Wars. But of course, they won't just be going for the audience that has no interest in Star Wars and won't watch it. No, they do have things for the hardcore fans as well.
Leslye takes you on an adventure that lets you inside what she loves about Star Wars.
Shoutouts to the hardcore fans will be sprinkled into the dialogue. Things like, may the force be with you. Next, she's going to be doing a Sherlock Holmes show where he goes, indubitably, my dear Watson. What more proof do you need that this is the right person for the job? That clip really does sound like the audience screaming in pain, doesn't it? No! Yes, The Acolyte is off to a great start, and they're very confident in the show. You can tell that by the fact they already started coming out and attacking the fans. You know that a lot of women in Star Wars struggle with fan attacks because of the fan base being so male-dominated. And rather than giving them what they want, no, we're going to do what I want instead.
Very well.
I can't imagine why these attacks happen. The most interesting thing about this is if you were running it as a company, what your response would be to the fan base not liking something because it's so male-dominated is you would fire these people. But no longer do any of these people care about money. Well, no, that's not true. They do care about money. It's just they already got paid for it. They don't care about the company being profitable, just their own bank balance. That's why we will focus on things that the male-dominated fan base don't want, which leads us into this article. Perhaps the greatest list of why this thing is going to fail that you've ever seen. It just rolls out the 24-karat gold bangers one after another. And when you combine it with all the interviews they've had, builds up a very clear picture as to not only what this show's going to be, but how horrifically repulsive it's going to be at the same time. Leslye Headland was a teenager, ostracized at school for being different, and it sounds like rather than using that as a learning experience of how to fit in society and act like a normal person, instead she took a very different lesson from it.
Perhaps our existence, just like anything that exists outside of the binary, the establishment can find that threatening.
The Acolyte will be a very personal story for her, and as such, basically just has a narcissistic chip on its shoulder.
And she doesn't necessarily identify just as Sith. There's a lot more room in this world for Force users that don't really fit into the binary of light and dark.
One on Disney Plus, it will cost $180 million for just 8 episodes, which are apparently 30 minutes each. That's $750,000 a minute. And they spent that much because they wanted to please old school fans who seem unpleasable. That would probably be because they're a male-dominated fan base, and you seem to hate men. Yes, you will find it hard to please men when what men want is diametrically opposed to what a lot of women want.
Oh, no, I'm a Libra. I can't make decisions like this.
But when the audience is male, luckily, the opinion of women is irrelevant. Literally, you don't have to listen to it. In fact, listen to it and then do the opposite.
It isn't about something that is representing a political entity or about the establishment, some sort of like dogmatic power that says who can and cannot be a part of it. It's about connection to something much simpler and much purer, and that is life.
The Acolyte taking a different tack, though. No, this is for people who know nothing about Star Wars and showcases women and people of colour.
I'm a short person, and when we got on set, the lightsaber kept hitting the ground whenever I'd twirl it.
I sense something. Dark.
This is a male-dominated fan base, but why won't they be pleased when we just center women? You do remember what they commented a couple of years ago.
I like to make men uncomfortable.
In a very woman-centered world, well, I was very excited. Yes.
Guided by my activism, I enjoy making men uncomfortable. 2024 now, and I think it's about time that we had a woman to shape the story.
Kind of cool to have like this sort of woman-centered figure.
You need to change your attitude.
I can't imagine why this doesn't appeal to men. As appealing to the core Star Wars fans, Kathleen Kennedy told her, "You've written a great Star Wars show. now go and write a Leslye Headland show. Okay, you've written something that's good for Star Wars, but can we just change all that and just have you, please? That's what the male-dominated audience will want, isn't it? Leslye Headland. Interesting little fact about Leslye Headland we got from the interviews.
Sabers in real life, what color would it be?
Red.
Red.
Red. I love the guy's reaction, because he's red. You realize that makes you evil, right? One of the foundational building blocks of Star Wars, and he knows what that means. He genuinely can't believe her answer.
Red.
Red.
I knew that. I said that about you yesterday.
Really?
I was like, Leslie's is red.
If it stayed at that, you could be like, well, red's my favorite color. No.
What does it say about you?
I mean,
Leslye is Sith.
yeah, I'm dark-sided.
Yeah, big Star Wars fan. She knows what the red lightsaber means.
I've always been dark-sided.
All Sith here.
Puts this picture in a bit of a different light, doesn't it? Now you know that. Well, how do you want to look in the photograph? Evil. Make me look as much like a Sith as possible. That's why this show is focused on inclusion. We're including everybody, excluding nobody, and so, to do that, we're lowering the standards. The Acolyte embraces a new Star Wars era, one that is defined by diversity and expansion. The more we lower the standards, the more people we can get inside.
I think the greatest part about Star Wars is that they have incredible characters and, every generation just sees themselves in them.
And to showcase this, we get a description of the cast, starting with Amandla Stenberg. I know, she doesn't have a description of her. Probably thought you already know her from every other single interview where it always mentions the same thing, where from January 2016 to 2 months later, she came out as 3 different things 3 separate times, calls herself both singular and plural, whereas in 2018 just decided she was something else as well.
I'm actually in rainbow attire right now. You would never know.
That's the great thing about having Amandla on your show. She probably makes you qualified to enter into the Oscars just on her own. But then we get a Jedi Master from Squid Game, Jodie Turner-Smith, Queen and Slim. I don't know if she has 2 different names or they're just talking about her weight.
Yes.
Who plays the lesb leader of a regal coven of witches. I think I've seen that movie before. And I have to say, this might be the greatest Google search I've ever done in my life. How I accidentally joined. Apparently, they existed in 15th century Morocco. It has its own section on TikTok. Goodreads has a shelf dedicated to it. And I don't know what's going on with Wikipedia, but that sentence makes it worth the click to try and find out.
Made something incredible. I think it's a masterpiece, and I think the storytelling is masterful.
But that kind of listing of category over talent of the person is the entire paragraph. It's got, well, we've got this guy, he isn't English. Oh, look where they bang theirs. This one's Filipino-Canadian. And look, behind the camera, it's true too. These people don't have dangly bits. And remember, male-dominated audience. Why are you having to go with these women that are making things? Because they're making things for men when they have no idea how to do it. Because they're making things not for the audience.
This is about power and who is allowed to use it.
Representation is important because they can actually embody the audience. If a man makes a film, he'll understand how men think. He'll have masculine values, and that will inherently show within the show. Of course, if you just have a lot of women making things for a male-dominated audience, they'll have no idea about this, and so they'll make things for themselves. And we know how that turns out.
Yeah, I'm dark-sided. I've always been dark-sided.
All Sith here.
There is a way you can save Star Wars, and because it's a male-dominated audience, to make Star Wars male again. A loud, primordial part of the Star Wars fandom has pushed back on it in a predictable fashion. I love the way they're using the term primordial in this context to essentially mean old and backwards, when actuality what they're describing is the fan base, the original fan base, the one that's always been here, the one that created the IP to be what it currently is, the only people that matter. Now that is obviously one of the worst things that you could say to someone like Kathleen Kennedy. You're irrelevant, no one cares about you, and you don't matter. But it is the truth. You're not the audience of Star Wars, so your opinion doesn't matter. That's why when people are coming out and going, why are there so many women and girls in Star Wars? It matters, because they're the audience. They're the ones with the money. They're the only ones that can keep this thing afloat. And so it doesn't matter if they go, why do you want this? Well, we want them. Don't care. Don't care. Bye. Fired. The instant you get this reaction from your audience, you fire the cast. If they're not happy, they get what they want. It is a version of the same misogyny and racism. It doesn't matter. Even if it's true, even if it was accurate, that actually makes it worse. If you actually believe this accusation, it's what you would be doing as a company to make money. It doesn't matter whether you agree with the audience. That's what they want, and so you supply it to them. And this showcases itself when it comes to morality, masculine values, right, wrong, justice. People get what they deserve. To the Acolyte, where everything's grey, we're all equal, and all our moral values are exactly the same.
Through the language and the development of these characters, you realize that bad and good is in the eyes of the beholder.
I get in trouble for this question.
That's how they can look at the world of Jedi and Sith and gone, well, have you considered that the Sith have a point? Have you considered that they might not have been evil?
This Jedi Force believes the good that is grounded in that. You know, though, life is way more complicated.
And instead it was society that oppressed them and forced them to be that way. Maybe they're just sympathetic. Maybe they're just misunderstood.
In a galaxy where sort of every choice is made by light or darkness, your character really encourages individualism, and I think it's really cool to see that.
Especially when they cast one of their preferred classes as a Sith, and now, suddenly, well, they can't be evil because that actually goes against all the rules that we set for ourselves. So we're gonna have to pretend that they're good. Have to pretend that all the good guys are wrong.
So I definitely think exploring the gray area is interesting, and Leslye could speak to it, you know, more than I can, what intrigued her so much about that.
We're going to have to try and find some leeway. This comes under the idea that everything and everyone is equal and couldn't be more repulsive to a male audience, as it is diametrically opposed to how they organize themselves through hierarchy. And that's not just hierarchy of things like strength and competence, but of morals and deeds.
We want to live in peace, and we want to find a place where we are not persecuted for possessing powers that we feel are unnatural to us and that we should have, and that we don't need to be Jedi in order to have.
Well, Anakin just killed a whole Death Star. How many people died on that?
That is, anyway, if Disney wanted to make money. Disney obviously is a corporation. Corporation's opinion is also irrelevant unless the corporation imposes their will on its employees. If the employees aren't enforced by people like the CEO and the executives and fired when they try this stuff, then obviously they won't care. They won't care if the company makes a profit. They won't be driven by profit at all because they personally are already getting paid. They're getting rewarded, and they're getting rewarded for doing this to the audience, giving them what they don't want, and attacking them at every opportunity. And it's so funny when they do this because you know they have no idea what they're talking about, whether that be a question about what is the Night Sisters.
Well, I wouldn't compare them to the Night Sisters. I think it's best not to, and to just walk in with an open mind about who they are. But, you know, basically...
That was a lot of words that didn't really say anything, and the other person's laughing because they know what's happening. Or the belief that whether you're good and evil simply comes down to whether you identify as such.
Does she have a moral compass left? And if so, what guides it?
I believe that May has an incredible moral compass. Now, it's at odds with the world around her, and she doesn't necessarily identify just as Sith.
Rather than any objective standard.
No one's all bad or all good. There's always a little bit of bad in the good and a little bit of good in the bad. And I think it's all about going up and down that spectrum for these characters.
I do like, though, when they're like, this is the same racism that greeted Rey. By which they mean Daisy Ridley, English actress. Judging by that, I think we've finally reached the end point where I'm officially an oppressed class. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Bigots. And that's not the only reason to like The Acolyte. It's also going to be self-referential, like every other Star Wars series has, because it's got nothing else to do.
Or certain scenes are really mimicking, or there are parallels to, you know, previous scenes that we've seen in other movies.
That this is the golden era of the Jedi, and I think Leslye really captured that.
And it has my favorite part of all the interviews, where we watch Leslye Headland crush the soul of the interviewer.
Can you tell me how you specified specific colors for each?
Purely aesthetic.
She actually seems to be a fan. She meant this seriously. And Leslye just gives like a joke response.
Person's fighting this person. Will it be more interesting for them to have this color or this color?
Kinda just said it didn't matter at all. It was just how it looked, babe. This woman had spent hours coming up with various different reasons of how it all happened. No, I didn't care about any of that.
Time over the course of my life, I have sat there and figured out ways to attribute specific colors to specific characters is blowing my mind.
That's not how it looks on the screen, babes. You care about this IP too much. I'm not taking it that seriously, love.
It's like an aura, kind of.
Yeah, I feel like at least I've made that excuse in my head.
It really comes down to the fans care more about Star Wars than the people making it.
Yeah.
And we got to see it play out live. Seriously, that interviewer seemed crushed.
It's like an aura, kind of.
Yeah, I've made that excuse in my head.
Kathleen Kennedy also experienced this from South Park when they attacked her in a parody to chicken it, make her lame and gay. I mean, what was Kathleen Kennedy offended by? Did she want it to be less literal? Kennedy says, my belief is that storytelling does need to be representative of all people. That's not true. It's actually a really awful decision, and that should be a fireable offense in itself, having that belief, because you're losing the company billions. Storytelling does not need to be, nor should it ever be, representative of all people. Storytelling should be representative of the male-dominated fan base. All of the people that have nothing to do with your fan base and your IP should be happily ignored, and when they chirp in, laughed at. You don't need them, you don't want them, and your standards are high enough that you actively excluding them to actually raise the quality of your IP. The quality of anything is judged by the standards of the people it excludes. But operating with these giant franchises and social media, it's terrifying. It wouldn't be if you gave the audience what they wanted, rather than what you wanted.
Expected to be a massive hit, as it should be. It's masterful storytelling. and I expect it to go on for a long time. I have no idea.
Star Wars projects aren't known for their personal or idiosyncratic filmmaking. The budgets are simply so high to do that. Except this time, we're making an exception. This time, it's going to be the Leslye Headland show. It's all going to be about personal experience. It's going to be so incredibly emotional. Leslye, this is what you tap into and write this story for us. What about personal experience and emotional crying? In other words, effeminate for the male-dominated fanbase. Should we make a show about good versus evil? Men fighting, dying, and sacrificing themselves. A story about evil people getting what they deserve. No, let's just talk about personal experience, my life, and crying. I'm a witch coven. Hear me roar as I cry. Now, there have been clips in the interviews talking about how this is going to be about family.
Can't wait to show it to my daughter when she's old enough. So I think it has something to do with, with family.
Although I have a feeling it's not going to be about a father, a mother, 2.4 children living happily together and being raised with traditional values. No.
What does it do to a child to take them away from their family, away from their planet, away from their culture, be thrown into this?
Melting pot, too, with a bunch of other.
Yeah.
I have a very strained relationship with my younger sister. It's strained because we both see each other as the bad guy. To be fair, Leslye, so did you.
I'm dark-sided. I've always been dark-sided.
All Sith here.
And it seems that we should start with a familial relationship where one personally is adamantly convinced of the correctness and the other person is also convinced of the correctness. And this is the most stupid, two-dimensional, low IQ take I've ever seen. And I see it everywhere. Oh, but they're saying the same thing about you. So, just because two people say the same thing about each other does not mean that one of them isn't correct. If the Jedi call the Sith evil and the Sith call the Jedi evil, that doesn't mean they're both the same.
According to the Jedi, the power that we have to manipulate the Force is to be feared, is wrong.
It means that the Jedi are good and the Sith are wrong. Their opinions are irrelevant on the matter. Oh, but I think no one cares. And they also have doubts that you actually do. I think this will be a surprise to her. You have spent $180 million so you can send a passive-aggressive email to your sister. When she logs onto Disney Plus and watches this, whoa, will she have a surprise that the entire show is about her and me telling her what I think of her.
What are you going to do to stop the crazies?
This is why you get blokes to do it. They wouldn't be doing that. She wouldn't say anything more on the topic. Leslye is really driven by emotion and heart and relationships. Of course she is. Her main problem is her male-dominated fan base isn't. There's a reason why Bond films are essentially James Bond walking into a room and everyone's knickers drop to the ground. Because all the flowery stuff in the middle is irrelevant to a male-dominated audience. What they want to see is for England, James. No. For me.
For England, James? No, for me. There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. You bow to no one.
That's the masculine values of justice and evil getting what it deserves. And then at the end, he gets the girl basically without trying. That's the perfect male life. I did great thing and she just turns up without any effort. That's entirely different to, I want to be emotional and all heart and relationships. Where you want to be chased, impressed, fought over. Those are two entirely different stories that don't exist together. Those are two entirely different audiences. What she lacked in experience, she made up for with $180 million. Sorry, no, Star Wars geekdom. It was an apocalyptic period of her life. That must have been messy. Is that why you have red everywhere? I'd love to know. I had no friends, she recalled. I ate lunch in the bathroom. That was just on set of The Acolyte. If this doesn't succeed, it's because of me. That's scary to think about. Don't worry, love. If it's the mystery of success or failure that is making you panic, I can definitely tell you what's going to happen. With confidence. So at least your mind will be set at rest. But it looks like we know what The Acolyte is. A Star Wars show not intended for the male-dominated audience of Star Wars fans. It's after a new audience, the mythical audience, the one that doesn't actually like or care about Star Wars. The one that has no morals, has embraced modernity and thinks that good and evil are the same thing. The people that think the grey zone, the one where we can actually try and justify to ourselves that we're not really evil. That's oh so very interesting. The people who don't actually think but might consider themselves to be the deep philosopher. Oh no, there isn't a right and wrong answer. Actually, things are far more nuanced and complicated. We've all met the type and they're generally journalists.
It's why I've kind of stopped using the word villain, because I feel like people look at a villain as like a surface level, like bad person. Where
But I think Kathleen Kennedy was right. This is going to be the Leslye Headland show. The red lightsaber Sith-coded show. The Star Wars if Russell T Davies had written it. And for that, I don't think it's going to be a good show, but I do think it'll be a funny one. Even if the comedy comes from the sheer absurdity of the statements. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video, if you like the video, subscribe. More videos like this in the future, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.